Hey, this is Peter. I'm the co-founder of OpenMeter, the usage-based billing platform. And today we have Pete Abrams with us, who is a long-time veteran around pricing and sales. And we are going to talk about how to price in early stage. And he's going to share his learning. So Pete, can you introduce yourself quickly to the audience?
Sure. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with your audience. I've been in the high-tech industry selling, shall we say, compute and software products to enterprise IT since the late 80s. My first job in that industry was with Sun Microsystems. I was there for 10 years. Um, Before the internet, way before the cloud, back when, people had to build their own data centers or, lease their own data centers, fill them up with boxes, and then deploy software onto them. Um, then I sort of moved out of big company and started getting into smaller startups. I was in a early cloud company that was kind of too early to market. It was an Amazon-like offering, but before the market wasn't ready for that yet. But we sure learned a lot. And then My next big company or most successful company was I got into the observability space with AppDynamics, joining right at the end of 2008 when there was only six people, and brought that company into the marketplace and learned a lot about pricing. Between AppDynamics and Sun, I was probably at five different companies that did okay here and there, security, storage, all types of IT products, always selling new products to IT. Back when we called it IT, information technology. um, and and then saw the evolution into the cloud, which was a major change. Um, uh, at AppDynamics, that company was founded in 2008. I believe Amazon Web Services, the compute platform, came to market in late 2007, if I recall. Um, and We wanted to try to take advantage of that and start building some tooling that would help people who are building applications in that new world. And then stayed in the observability space up until recently, where I started consulting with lots of different small companies, including OpenMeter. So that's my story.
Awesome. That's quite a journey. So
Yeah,
basically, you mentioned that you were basically already in selling to IT in those days, even before the internet. So
yeah,
I assume that was basically walking into people, like maybe you can share something about how even pricing worked back in those days, but sounds like you basically have seen both the pre-internet era, early internet era,
yeah.
then the cloud adoption, how SaaS started to become a thing. I know
Yep,
AppDynamics had some open source angle,
yep.
and then I know Instana was very focused on product-led growth. So that's kind of fascinating. So I would love to hear from you, kind of how pricing evolved. How did it look like in the pre-internet era?
Yeah,
Like was it all individual negotiation,
yep,
or was it more
yeah.
similar to today, just leave somewhere on a paper? How did it look like?
It's interesting that um, in those days it was essentially supply constrained. I mean, back in Sun Microsystems, we had to dole out our servers and workstations very carefully. There was more demand than there was supply. And what that meant was that customers had to pay everything upfront in advance, usually 30 to 60 days receivable. Um, Basically, take all the risk of their investment. Um, and software was essentially the same. If you wanted to, if you wanted to buy software packages, and by the way, Most people bought their business solutions. They didn't, and then customize them. They didn't write them from scratch. Um, you had to do the same. You had to, pay for it in advance. The payment model was, it's like, it's kind of like ask the question, well, a small company probably can't afford the same amount of money as a big company, and they probably have less transactions. So how do you model that? The way they would model it is price per number of CPUs that your software was running on, as like a proxy to how much business flow was going, across the software. So you would literally kind of say, all right, we're going to estimate, and this was a lot of what the POCs were about, that to run this software with this many users, it's going to take this many servers. And then, go back to the price list of the software company. Hey, to run it on, let's say, 10 servers, it costs this much money. And then, of course, there's some negotiation, but then it's a perpetual payment with an annual support charge. So, and it was pretty cruel because the perpetual license, let's say, you bought version 7 of the software. The license is only for version 7. I mean, there would be some negotiations like, no, we don't want to do that. We got to have some other deal. But no, it was usually, no, version 7 and 7.1, 7.2, 7.3. That's what you paid the support charge for, which was 20%, typically 20% per year of the list price. And that part was usually not negotiable. So, then, version 8 or 9 comes along and you're like, really need those features. Guess what? You got to buy a new license. Sorry. And it was...
You know what's fascinating to me in this? That obviously the SaaS era was all about seat-based pricing, and now it's all about usage-based pricing and consumption.
Yeah.
But basically, you are telling me that 30 years ago, basically people were paying after usage, after number of CPUs. Just obviously the feedback loop wasn't as real-time as today, that you have a per second read on the CPU. It was a rough estimate, not an actual measurement. And basically, the other thing I hear that it's pretty common in pricing today that customers only get the new features on the latest pricing, and that's kind of a pushing power for customers to upgrade to the new pricing to get the new features. Sounds like that was happening even 30 years ago. Just
but don't
versions.
forget the supply constraint part, right? Because the thing that the cloud changed the most was essentially infinite access to compute, infinite immediate access to compute. And that is such a dramatic game changer that it throws a lot of sort of pressure, or I guess maybe more like opportunity into the balance between the customer and the supplier, right? And they try to create more creative, long living relationships. The other thing that when we shifted in the early 2000s, I think the first real SaaS company was Salesforce, right? And they changed the pricing model to be an annual subscription around the number of users, using the product, using the platform, right? And that was the only way you could buy it, right? There was no other choice. That's the model. They sort of invented, almost the PLG approach as well. Which was, hey, try it and get started on your own. We tried to make this simple, give you all the access to the features, and then just use your credit card, put 3 or 4 people on there, get going, and then as you get deeper and deeper into the product, we have some bigger enterprise features that you may be interested in, but we'll get to that later, right? It's really about making it easier for the customer to access the product. But the shift is let's take some of the risk out of this equation, because if you go back to those early days, think of how much risk there is for me to want to, let's say I want to buy, a common one in those days was called PeopleSoft, right? It was like an HR application that helped you manage, all your relationship with your employees and, their pay grades and their, and keep compliant and all that kind of stuff, right? A very, very popular product. Well, okay, so if I want to deploy PeopleSoft, I have to put out a lot of capital. So I have to be really sure that project is going to, give me a payback, right? And therefore, there's a lot of scrutiny during the POC cycle, a lot, and a lot of pressure. And the honest truth is, 5 years later, the customers are kind of scratching their head going, did I really get a true ROI out of this investment? And the answer became more and more, not particularly. And I'm not picking on PeopleSoft. I'm just saying across the board of buying enterprise software, right? That became, realized and so what happened was, the customers, the enterprises became very reluctant to put out that much capital. And that's the thing that also shifted people to trying these new business models, right? Which is, well, look, just get started. We'll reduce the amount of money it takes you to get over the hump and start using this. And it changes the equation of risk management on the customer side. And it also changes the way that the vendors start thinking about their product. Is like, okay, what do I want to have my customer experience in terms of the value that they, receive from their engagement with my software, so that they kind of fall in love with it and become addicted to it and don't want to live without it, right? It kind of creates a more mutual, beneficial relationship, which I think is good for everybody. And then once I'm getting real value out of a product, I mean, why would I not want to pay for it? There's no, it just changes the whole relationship to a much more mutually beneficial model. So that's the world we're living in today, and that's sort of been this, this evolution. And that's, by the way, why I get excited about working with OpenMeter, because essentially you're a platform that helps the suppliers get creative about delivering value and monetizing that value.
You know what's very interesting to me, just to make more parallel versus today and these iterations of pricing, is that basically you were talking about that in the very early days when people literally deployed software in their data center. It was a box software. The cost was very high. And then you were talking about that basically software as a service and cloud made really easy the initial investment, and you could grow with the number of seats. Yeah. And basically everything that's happening with AI today and how we see the industry being more priced on usage consumption, that's kind of interesting, because you have both things today. That obviously with usage, the customer can really control how much they want to use something and how much they want to pay for it. Yeah. But on the other end, it's also expensive for a vendor, these new AI models, these GPUs. So like, I see kind of both coming back in some kind of theme, but maybe the customer value is still very similar in a sense that they can decide how much they consume and they can start very little.
Well, it makes a certain amount of sense that hey, when there's a high cost of delivering a service, then the vendor is a little bit, put on the back foot, right? Because it's like, hey, I really have something of high value here, right? And I want to get you using it, but you have to work with me here because I have a fair amount of, basically COGS, right? Cost of goods sold in my service creation / delivery, right? And so why don't we come up with some new ideas in terms of how to price this? Now, clearly it's not going to be a perpetual because the customer doesn't want to pay up front for everything, right? And perpetual, means give it to me forever. After I pay, I get to use it forever. Well, that ain't going to work, right? Sorry, I don't know if it got blocked out there. That's not going to work when that happens, right? Um, but so how about we go to a much more kind of creative idea that says, let's just, pay really rapidly as soon as I deliver value, why don't you just pay me right then? Because then I, can pay off my cogs, right? Hey, these GPUs don't seem to be too cheap, right? Of course, on a unit basis they are, but I mean, it takes a lot of this stuff to actually, create AI insights, shall we just say, right? And I got to pay that off quickly, garner my margin, right? And now I can build a business that really drives this, mutual, beneficial relationship between the two of us.
Yeah, it's very interesting how maybe you maybe you can reflect on if the customer value perception changes, or it was always the case, but basically when you were talking about selling box product back in the days, the value was basically having unlimited access to the software after it was sold. Then with SaaS, it was basically the value was that certain people with the seats have access, and then usage-based is basically the value is when I am using the product, which for lots of dev tools, that's basically equals with the final kind of product and value, like something like compute. It would be really hard to tie, I feel today, to something more narrow than value, but there is obviously the new trend around outcome-based pricing, success-based pricing, that Intercom is a good example for that they basically charge a customer when a support ticket is successfully answered, which is very valuable because basically you are saving human time from an actual support person, and for sure your customer is satisfied because they got the answer.
Yeah.
So like today you can go really, really narrowed and focused on what success is and the value is. Do you think it was always users would have preferred this kind of narrowing down the value, or that kind of an evolution there?
This is a really interesting question because this is exactly related. It's like these are parallel tracks to another thing that we all kind of know this, but when I say this, I think that people don't really usually process it this way. The other difference, or the other historical line that's happened, continuum, shall we say, is every new generation of technology, what it did, everybody talks about reduces the cost. That's not all it did. What it also did is reduce the time it takes to get a return on investment. It's like, wait a second, what? Right? So, okay, the time it would take, so I would pay Sun Microsystems, the customer would pay us, it would take like 2 months for them to get delivery out of our factory, like onto their dock, right? Okay, now it takes like another month to get it off the dock, out of the box, into racks, powered up, and just sitting there with an IP address inside their data center, right? That's like, okay, so that's like 3 months, right? Now it takes another couple weeks to get software on it. Now it takes another 6 months to a year to customize that software and roll it out to my users, right? So the time to value of the investment was, usually multiple years. Crazy, but true. Yeah, right? Now, okay, every generation of software that we've experienced over the last 30 years reduces that time, right? Because, why, let's go back to the foundations. Why are businesses paying for technology? Because it helps them operate their business more efficiently, the two foundations of running a business. I either want to become more efficient to create, gross margin, or I want to do something that creates more sale, right? Top line. So these information systems have to do one of the two things, right? Or it's not a valid investment, right, to a business. And so if I can reduce the time that it takes to, create that value or garner that value, great, right? Excellent. Better use of capital for sure, right? And that actually explains why certain technologies won in this progression that we've witnessed and other approaches lost out, right? Because, there was always competition along the way, right? Why did methodology, whether you're talking about the infrastructure, the software stacks, that people would purchase, and then let's layer on, okay, the progression of software development methodology, technology/methodology is also exactly aligned to this, right? Why did microservice take over, from SOA? Remember SOA, service-oriented architecture, sort of the first version of distributed technology. Why did microservice win? Because it makes it easier to build software faster. It's as simple as that, right? Why did we go from really, why did Java win over C++? And same, why did Java and .NET win over C++? Exactly the same reason. It's easier to write software. It makes it quicker to write software. Why is it today that there's, in the average enterprise application stack, there's usually probably 5 languages running in that morass of microservices, maybe 10, right? Why? Because it's easier to write software. It's quicker. You get business value faster, right? It's all aligned, and as soon as you're doing that, then you can start asking, well, wait, what's the right way to monetize this, right? And it's kind of like, you need pricing innovation, price modeling and pricing innovation, along with this progression of higher speed delivery of business value. So that sort of explains it in my view better than anything, because the businesses are the ones paying for all this, right? Right? They're the ones who are writing the checks, footing the bill, right? For the net industry.
So if we started to talk about pricing models and pricing evolution and time to value, then I guess it's also changed in the industry how frequently you change pricing and how frequently you can adapt to it.
Yeah.
Can you maybe talk about a little bit that, was it back in the days like an annual price change or per customer? And then how you have seen that changing for the SaaS world and the today world, when obviously every week there is a new AI news and some new breakthrough.
Well, yes. So yeah, back in the day, we literally published a paper price list, right? And it would change annually. Very, very rarely it would change more than annually. Sometimes there'd be a new product introduction. And
I guess the pricing model even then stayed the same, right? It was like a CPU.
Very, very static, right? And then, and then we moved to this model where, you would change it relatively quickly. I think another way to look at it is another experience that I've had is, at a startup, okay, you're going to sell your first deal. Every company in the world had their first customer, right? Well, I can really guarantee you that the first 10 customers paid a very different price and probably even a different pricing model, right? How did you do it? What are you pricing? What are you counting? What's the price per unit? What's the time duration? All that stuff is, for sure going to change as you learn a lot of things. First of all, what is the exact value you're delivering, right? Of course, we had some thesis, but as we brought this into the marketplace, we learned, they really appreciate this aspect the most. So, let's connect our price model directly to that, right? Directly to that. So it well may change off of that first 6 months of selling, right? So not only what are you counting, right, and how are you developing the price per what, right, but also the price itself, right? And so what that puts is, I guess I'd say pressure on the whole organization to be able to execute on that price change, right? I mean, you have to be able to have business agility. It becomes a requirement for any startup, right? Then the next thing that starts happening, by the way, is hey, we got our first, let's say you're up to like 30, 40, 50 customers. And now you start getting enough sort of brand and a little bit of recognition, right? And you sort of your product's finding its it's sort of its mojo, right? The developers have cleaned things up and added the features that really matter. And some big customer comes in and says, okay, this is exactly what I'm looking for, but right, I'm gonna need a custom price. So, it's kind of like the pen, drops and you can hear, it's like, gulp, what do we do, right? And it's like, so guess who has the power in that discussion? It's the salesperson. The salesperson, becomes the most powerful person in the company at that moment because everybody in the company wants to make them successful, right? But there's all this pressure that says, we don't know how to price that way. What do we do? How are we gonna deliver that? How are we gonna count that? Right? And let me just tell you, they're gonna figure it out, right? And that's when you need,
a couple of sleepless nights for the engineering team to implement, what sales was selling.
That's what happens. That's truly what happens. I mean, I can give you a really interesting anecdote about that. We at AppDynamics, it was really interesting. One of our very first customers was Netflix. If you kind of go back to go in a time machine, jump in a time machine, Netflix actually announced their internet service, right, streaming service in 2010, and AppDynamics announced their product in March of 2010, I believe it was. And we had landed them as a beta customer in December of 2009. They first started using AppDynamics on their old platform for the business system, for payment, for the DVD business, via mail, right? The red envelope business, right? The red Netflix envelope that you'd get in the mail business. I get a call from this guy named Adrian Cockcroft, who was their main architect, and he was my counterpart. I was the sales guy on Netflix. He was the counterpart over there, like the lead architect. He says, "Hey, Pete, I haven't talked to you about this, but those licenses that we bought, do you mind if we use those, on Amazon and, start using more and more of that stuff?" And I was like, what? Yeah, baby. That sounds interesting. I said, go ahead and start doing it. We're going to have to figure out how to price that, but just start doing it. You have our full permission, and then, let's get it working, and then we'll have a pricing discussion. And the exact same thing happened, right? We had to scramble to figure out how to price that thing. And we basically came up, so in the early days of AppDynamics, we were priced per Java machine under management, essentially, per JVM under management, right? And we had this licensing mechanism. It would count the number of JVMs, and if you had more, it would just say, no, sorry, you got to buy more license, So we had to turn that feature off, and then we had to start counting per Java machine per hour. And they would send us a spreadsheet at the end of the month with a comma separated file. I'm not joking, right?
I guess
That
usage
had,
metering wasn't as smooth than today.
right, exactly. That would have all the usage of AppDynamics on the Netflix platform. It was like, wow. Yeah, and then create a bill out of that by hand. Literally, we would add it. We would like freaking process that thing through a little script that we built and generate a bill.
Yeah,
Wow.
so you talk basically about the evolution of the company from pricing perspective, from business side. You mentioned that the first couple of deals will be probably very ad hoc, very
Yep.
not even similar to each other. And then the company will progress into more unified pricing, maybe even a self-service motion. And then there will be always enterprise deals, and those requires a lot of kind of pricing flexibility. So obviously, I'm very biased because we work a lot with developers and product managers to help them implement the pricing and help to go to market with new product and new pricing models. So I just want to share what we heard with talking with a couple of hundred companies and helping them to launch their pricing. That what's really interesting, what you describe on the business side, that has all implications on the development and product side. So like what we see basically in a very, very early stage when seed, pre-seed, that lots of the companies just basically sending payment links or kind of just send PDF invoices to the first couple of customers. And that works fine. And then when they got into more that they want to implement self-service and they want to able to provide their customers a solution when they can just sign up, they can choose what they buy, they can upgrade on their own, downgrade, cancel. That's when really companies start to build out the billing system. And that kind of becomes that point, the billing system and the code kind of becomes the product catalog, kind of what they are selling. And then as companies progresses to that kind of next stage, what you described, that they start to have these bigger logos, bigger deals, enterprise motion, sales one customization, that kind of when there's lots of pressure is put on the engineering team. Because now that time, usually the companies already went through multiple pricing iterations. So even their code and billing system is very bloated. They have some old customers, an old pricing model, new customers getting the new pricing, and now suddenly there are these enterprise deals. And then the next iteration, you need to integrate that with CRM, NetSuite, QuickBooks, all these kind of more enterprise invoicing solutions. And it's really interesting that you were describing how much flexibility required here and reduce the time. But basically, on the technical side and pricing side, things become really, really complex in this journey.
Well, that very much aligns with the challenges that I've seen at a number of the SaaS-based companies that I've either worked at or consulted with. I mean, I think the other thing that happens that I've witnessed is, let's say you're now into year 2, year 3, year 4, right? And you got a successful product line, but of course the developers, they never stop adding to the product, right? And it oftentimes becomes a little bit of a question mark for the vendor, for the SaaS product, to decide how to price in major new pieces of functionality. Because you usually start with this sort of basic product and enterprise product, maybe just 2 levels. Sometimes you can do 3 levels, right? But it doesn't always work out that there's an exact map to hey, we added this whole piece of functionality. It's a little bit orthogonal, doesn't exactly fit into that. And so we want to start pricing it as an add-on, right? And so add-ons are interesting from a sales perspective because it kind of gives the sales team another handle on how to close deals, which kind of goes like, hey, how about to close this enterprise deal, I'll throw in for the first year for free this core other feature that we usually charge that much for, but I'm going to give it to you for free because I think you can use it. And hey, if you want, we'll even pre-negotiate what the price will be when the year runs out for next year. So you don't feel like I'm going to come in and be over aggressive with my price ask on that. Um, or you see what I mean, right? You can get all these gambits. What you're trying to do at that stage is you're trying to give the salespeople tools to close deals, right? And then the other thing that happens usually starts around year 3, um, is you start getting really you really want to maximize the ARR, the annual revenue that you're getting from any given customer, right? And you want to absolutely minimize churn, right? The loss of a customer, because hey, think about it. You spend all this money to capture that customer and get them successful and get them start using it, and you're hoping that they'll be paying you for 5 to 10 years, right? You should be able to have a relationship like that if you're a meaningful product, right? So losing one it's quite a disappointment, let's just say it that way, on the balance sheet, right? So you want to be able to really clearly watch for signs of utilization of your software that indicate opportunities for upsell, like, oh, this guy's really using this product well. We should try to sell them more, or sell them these add-ons, and they're clearly getting a lot of value from this. Hey, one of the foundation tenets of selling is, once a customer's comfortable with your brand and your value, they won't have much reluctance to buying more, right? If you have additional capability, obviously, right? And then conversely, oh my gosh, I noticed that this customer's hardly using our software anymore, right? But here's the key thing, right? What I just said is, I noticed, right? Well, hey, I got like 500 customers now. I don't have 500 salespeople, right? You know, I need something that helps me monitor, essentially, for these indicators, right? I need something that helps me, uh, you know, minimize my churn and maximize my ARR per customer. And now I can really drive, right? Now I'm really running a business, right? I kind of graduated out of startup mode and into, we're running a business when that happens.
That's what I see, that obviously lots of businesses, or most of them, already adopted usage-based pricing or thinking about usage-based pricing. And the first challenge is like, yeah, how do you meter usage? How do you implement billing? How do you invoice based on usage? Then kind of the next challenge is, how do you enable kind of those very flexible pricing changes for the business and for sales? And what you are describing for me is kind of the third problem that lots of organizations don't realize actually when they're moving into usage-based, that now everything is so close to real time and so close to the value, that both the value perception and the usage of the customer changes throughout the day on a per minute, per hour layer, which completely changes, or will change for those businesses, how sales, how account executives, how customer success kind of approaches kind of usage data. Because as you mentioned, like basically every day is an opportunity to kind of change your net revenue retention in a positive way. Every day is an expansion opportunity.
Absolutely. And imagine what happens when, we have all of these AI products that are, permanently assisting us, essentially. Well, that means that every hour is an opportunity for the AI product to be a hero or a goat, right? Just like, I don't like it anymore, I'm not using it. Well, that's a panic moment for the vendor, right? Or, wow, this has really been fantastic. How can I get this thing to do more for me? Well, you also want that indicator as the vendor, to try to engage for more value, more money.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. It's really interesting because in OpenMeter we have these usage alerts, for example, and many businesses use this very heavily to kind of signal when there is a time for to reach out to the customer,
yeah,
either on the underutilization or overutilization side. And lots of our customers, like net revenue retention increase, is coming solely from kind of acting on these usage insights.
yeah, acting on it is the key, right? But also monitoring for those indicators, for lack of a better word, right? What, it's like bring back the monitoring word, right?
I like the word monitoring because like that's the funniest thing around kind of usage-based billing, that
Mm,
usage-based billing is not that new. I mean, AWS
yeah,
is using it for like maybe 10 years or something like that. But usage data used to be very kind of slow in a sense that it took a day or a week to surface to the customer how much they used, both to the customer and the vendor. So it wasn't very actionable. And today, especially in the world of AI, that's both kind of expensive, both for the vendor and the customer. The margins are
mm,
much lower. Both sides is requires that very instant feedback that I have done something with the AI as a customer. I want to see that immediately reflected both in the usage and the cost. And the vendor also want to know for both the cost margin reason and to be able to kind of act on that insight. So that's kind of a very interesting shift for me around usage data, and that's why I like the word monitoring. What you said, because I think
yeah.
monitoring is very expresses that immediate kind of aspect
Well,
of
that's
it.
the idea, right? Like let's actively watch, monitor, right? The behavioral, the sort of intersection between behavior, usage, outcome, uh, and some kind of, almost like God, I mean, emotional, connection to the software. Is it giving me real value? If I think that becomes the next opportunity for these tools, is to try to really garner that type of feel and then feed that back. Because what you got to do is you have to feed that back to effectively the sales organization, right? That sales organization these days is that combination of the business side, the economic relationship builders, but also the value delivery builders, also known sometimes as the customer success team, right? It used to be called support, right? But support is I'm glad that went away, because that's like, oh, that's a total fail. Let's fix the total fail, right? That's what support
Yeah.
did, right? Whereas customer success is, are you really getting the value that you were hoping for? Let me engage you to assure your ROI.
That
And you
that's such
and
an important thing what you are saying, because
yeah,
basically support just prevents churn. But what you want with usage base, you want enablement. Even happy customers
yeah.
can always use more, and they can always leverage your product more.
Well, I can tell you from experience that the healthiest SaaS companies actually get most of their profit from their existing customer base, right? If they have a valid product that really delivers value, they're going to garner most of their sales and most of their profit from their existing customers, growing the utilization of those customers, right? And yeah, of course, I want to always be adding new customers, but on a yearly basis, usually in these SaaS models, if you think, go back to what we said, hey, just start using it. Well, you're not paying me that much at that point. So actually, I'm not making that much money if you look at my revenue statement on new customers. I don't really start making much money from new customers until like year 2, 3, and even 4, when I really grew them into maturity, and now they're paying me substantially, and I'm making real profit at that point, right? So you're always in this state where the most important thing is to keep our existing customers happy, because those are the ones who pay us the most money and make us the most profit, right? Because there's no more cost of sales at that moment, right? It's all just operational margin, right? Flow.
I
So
absolutely agree.
yeah,
We are running out of time, so it was really great to chatting and kind of you sharing your over 30 years of experience around pricing
thank
and
you,
the
man.
evolution of pricing, time
Yeah,
to market, kind
yeah,
of how usage-based, success-based pricing changes even customer success.
yeah.
Uh, what would be your kind of 3 advices for a young company, kind of
My
as
number, my
closing
number
thoughts?
one, good question. My number one is just be really comfortable with the fact that you're going to change your pricing system. Just be really comfortable. So don't, when you're first, it depends on your product type. Maybe it's first five, maybe it's your first 100 customers, your first, engagement with your marketplace. The most important thing is to get the customers really using your product so you can really learn from them and really improve your product's quality and your product's, value, capability set that delivers value, right? So yes, you want to monetize that, but you're not trying to make a profit yet. You're trying to get feedback, right? The next thing that I would give people advice on is you have to plan ahead to the world that we just talked about in terms of you're really going to want to manage your ARR, right? I mean, you're reporting to, your financiers, right? Your board and your investors. How is your ARR improving, right? And let's break that down into all the contributions. Well, okay, you can't build those systemologies in one night, right? I mean, these are systems and data systems and internal processes and feedback, reporting systems. It's going to take you time to build that. Don't delay that, right? As soon as you get past your first set of customers and and you sort of get past that first thing, it's also called product market fit. You have to start investing in your business systems and your business process and your pricing mechanisms and your ability to operate as a business. And that's it. I don't have a third one. That's
I love them.
yeah. So there you go, man. It's
Well,
been a lot of fun talking to you. Good luck,
likewise,
with
thank you for
Open
taking the
and
time to sharing your experience and thoughts with us. For the audience, if you want to read more and learn more about kind of pricing trends, usage-based billing challenges, or the technology behind, then check out the Open Meter blog. And see you next time.
take
Thank you,
care.
Pete.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Bye bye.